Hello, my dear ones. As I promised, today we will analyze the key events from the beginning of 2026 so we can learn how the universe speaks to us through what happens around us and what each situation is teaching us. So, my dear ones, if we understand the karmic meaning of our life as a path of learning, as a soul growing up, then life itself becomes filled with deep even wondrous meaning, no matter what events are unfolding around us. Events are only scenery. It's important to understand that. Scenery we need in order to pass the lessons of life as a school of wisdom and kindness. But how do we learn to read the sacred meaning of the scenery, of the events happening around us, especially those unfolding on the political stage? Sometimes a sneaky thought appears. So little depends on us anyway. Why even try to understand it? But no, my dear ones, the universe, like a kind and wise mother, creates around us exactly the circumstances and events we need most for spiritual maturity, according to the Creator's design. So let's learn to perceive any events, and especially political ones, as lessons for us personally and for the country we are part of. Let's begin learning this right now. I chose the events of January because they already happened. The emotional intensity has softened a little, but they are still relevant. This is very good material for training our karmic awareness. So, what could we observe at the beginning of 2026, and what is it telling us? 1. Are foreign policy decisions, Cuba, tariffs, the language of threats. Event. In January 2026, the US administration declared a national emergency related to the actions of the Cuban government and initiated tariff pressure on countries supplying oil to Cuba. The decision was delivered in firm, unambiguous rhetoric, emphasizing resolve and a refusal to use compromise language. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The year of the fire horse strengthens the themes of sovereignty, boundaries, and direct decisions. It lowers tolerance for diplomatic half-tones and pushes the language of force instead of the language of agreement. In such years, foreign policy often becomes symbolic. A gesture is not only a tool of pressure, but also a statement of identity. Why does this happen? And what does it tell us? It tells us that all diplomatic postulates more and more often stop matching inner truth and nobility, turning into manipulative instruments. And then, in periods of historical turbulence, leaders appear who, often unconsciously, begin to blow up the spoiled needle from the inside. What does this teach us? Society. It is time to revise many social and political institutions and cleanse them of manipulation. But in such periods, it is especially important to learn to distinguish mature, strategic resolve from reactive hardness driven by fear of losing control. The individual. What should you see for yourself? It is time to look inside and ask honestly what, behind the respectable outer form, truly corresponds to inner nobility, and what is only form without substance. Where is my firmness an expression of values? And where does it start turning into intolerance and anything goes? So look, what are we meant to realize and learn here? Political events in the country where we live. It may seem like all this is decided up there by politicians, but because you are part of your country and part of the world, the events that happen are speaking to something inside you. It's a hint for you, a reflection of what needs to be reconsidered inside you as well. And if you see it this way, You will stop feeling helpless, thrown into a sea where nothing depends on you. I never get tired of repeating this when I walk with people. Do you really think God would allow your life, your priceless living soul, created by Him, to depend only on someone out there, somewhere far away, and not on your choice in every situation? You don't choose the situations, you choose your response. And that determines what situations come next in your life. This is what we learn. Now, the second group of events we will learn from what happened at the beginning of the year. 2. Internal mobilization and the fight against addictions. Event. In January, an initiative was presented aimed at addressing addictions and restoring social stability, emphasizing the need for inner discipline and society's responsibility for its own weaknesses. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The fire horse draws attention not only to external conflicts, but also to internal sources of collapse. In such periods, karmic pressure shifts toward self regulation. Freedom without inner order begins to destroy the system from within. Freedom is not anarchy. Freedom is a conscious choice by a country and by each of its citizens in favor of spiritual growth and self organization. What this teaches society and the individual, that stability begins with inner processes, not only with external protection. For the individual, honest recognition of where you lose control and the need for mature responsibility for your habits and for your life. Even if it seems to you that these events and decisions have nothing to do with you, look a little deeper. Do you always have control over your own life? This is simply the universe speaking, reminding you. It is time to learn to be an adult when responsibility for your life is taken into your own hands. 3. Fires and the rebuilding of Los Angeles. Event. In January, federal attention focused on rebuilding Los Angeles after destructive fires, along with criticism of slow and ineffective recovery processes. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. Fire as an element symbolically matches the archetype of the year. It not only destroys, it exposes the weakness of old structures. The fire horse rarely allows us to limit ourselves to cosmetic repairs. It demands a rebuilding of the foundation. What does this teach? Society, the need to distinguish restoring appearance from restoring meaning and function. If we speak about making America great again, then first of all attention should be directed to the spiritual nobility of society, to the return and renewed radiance of American goodwill, respect for every person, responsiveness, and hard work, those qualities that once made this country special from within. The individual learn to recognize in your own life the situations where repairing and simply trying to meet accepted norms only delays an inevitable transformation. It is not enough to look as is proper. It is important to match your inner truth, conscience, and honor. This is work that is no longer worth postponing. It is time to speak honestly with your bravest, most truthful, and kind inner eye. Who does it want you to be? In truth, you have always known. And this year you will have enough strength to finally become that person. Don't miss this chance. So, my dear ones, from a fire in Los Angeles, we have moved into such deep and important themes. If you know how to recognize, hear, and decode what the universe is telling you even through political events, for reviewing FEMA and emergency response institutions. Event. In January, Discussions continued about reviewing FEMA and related emergency response institutions, including questions of effectiveness, accountability, and manageability. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The year of the fire horse strengthens the karmic audit of institutions. In such periods, it is not forms that survive, but functions. Systems that exist by inertia, by habit, or for self-preservation inevitably come under pressure. This year seems to ask a simple but very strict question. Do you truly fulfill your purpose, or do you only preserve the appearance of being needed? What this teaches society? It is time to distinguish institutional authority from institutional effectiveness. Not everything that has existed for a long time truly works and serves people. What this teaches the individual? It is time to review your own roles and identities that have lost their living function. Where are you truly living and acting? And where are you simply wearing a role or following a habit that has long lost its meaning? Which roles should you release so it becomes easier to breathe, work, love, and reach your goals? Find your real self. You are worth it. 5. Speeding up defense decisions and contracts. Event. In January, an executive document was signed prioritizing speed and efficiency in defense contracts and emphasizing rapid decision making in national security. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The fire horse strengthens the cult of speed. But in years like this, speed becomes a karmic trap. Decisions can be made faster than they can pass ethical, strategic, and human testing. This year seems to remind us speed by itself is not a guarantee of the right direction. What this teaches society to distinguish speed as necessity from speed as a substitute for meaning or as a reaction to an emotional surge. True safety is created by calmness, balance, and clarity of thought, not impulsive decisiveness. What this teaches the individual. Look honestly at where haste is used to avoid anxiety or responsibility, and where mature resolve and tempo are truly required. As with a country, so with a person, decisions should not be postponed forever, but they also must not be made in a flash. They must be made responsibly. 6. Regulating institutional investment in housing. Event. In January, an order was issued aimed at limiting institutional investment in the single family housing segment, addressing the question of housing affordability. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The year of the fire horse exposes accumulated conflicts between economic profit and social justice. Old compromises between the market and ethics stop working, they no longer keep the system in balance. What this teaches society? The need to revise rules for distributing resources and to take responsibility for the long-term consequences of economic decisions. What this teaches the individual? An honest look at your own choices between profit and values. What truly comes first for you? How strong is your inner core of bright, eternal values, values that are not for sale under the pressure of advantage? How do you relate to responsibility for your decisions? How do you treat life on credit, not only financially, but emotionally and spiritually? Ask yourself these questions. Now is the right time. 7. Immigration conflicts and protests. Event. In January, immigration operations intensified, accompanied by protests, local conflicts, and political disputes about the limits of federal authority. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The theme of boundaries is one of the central themes of the fire horse. This year sharpens a fundamental question. Where do boundaries truly protect, and where do they begin to turn into an instrument of exclusion, pressure, and violence? What this teaches society? The need for a mature conversation about borders that does not collapse into extremes. Such situations always arise in periods of turbulence when the old way is no longer possible, but the new way is not yet fully understood. So what do we do? Leaving everything as it is won't work, but while moving towards the new, it is crucial to preserve the core of nobility and humanity. Then there will be fewer distortions and overreaches. What this teaches the individual, the same in personal life. If something is outdated and needs rebuilding, change, but don't lose the main thing, humanity and the beauty of the soul. 8. Legal conflicts around presidential powers. Event. In January, the Supreme Court considered cases touching on the limits of presidential power and the independence of key institutions. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The fire horse demands clarity of legitimacy. In such periods, the question is not force, but right. Who makes decisions and on what basis? What this teaches society? The need for clear boundaries of power and responsibility. What this teaches the individual? A deeper understanding of your own boundaries of influence and responsibility in relationships and social roles. Where do you cross other people's boundaries? And where do you, on the contrary, allow others to cross your boundaries irresponsibly? In your sphere of influence, do you do everything that depends on you? Who is responsible for your life today? If you can honestly answer, I am, then you have already taken an important step toward maturity. 9. Temporary agreements to prevent a shutdown. Event. In January, short-term agreements were reached to prevent a partial government shutdown amid sharp political disagreements. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. The fire horse does not tolerate living on pauses. Temporary compromises in such years become a symptom of the system's deep exhaustion from unresolved core conflicts. What this teaches society to understand the limits of temporary solutions and the need for structural, though not easy, choices. Simply postponing or pausing since this year is no longer an option. What this teaches the individual, awareness of your own temporary agreements with yourself that have long required an honest review. How often have you silenced the voice of conscience, wisdom, and kindness with the words, for now, later, someday, one day? That someday has already knocked on the door. It is time to deal with what you kept putting into a fire drawer. 10. Expanded travel ban and the theme of borders event. From January 1st, 2026, expanded entry restrictions came into effect, measures introduced at the end of 2025. Analysis through the tendencies of the year of the red fire horse. Borders in this period become not only physical, but symbolic. The fire horse strengthens the lines of identity, who we are, and where our limit runs. What this teaches society. A mature attitude toward borders as a tool of order and responsibility, not fear. What this teaches the individual. Searching for your own identity beyond formal labels and social statuses. Who are you, really? Try a simple but very powerful exercise. Sit down and write a letter to yourself. Beyond your first and last name, what would you tell about yourself? What is your self-identity? What would you say to yourself about yourself? This is my author's technique, and it truly works. You can write this letter for a week, adding at least one short sentence every day. It is time to meet the most important person in your life, yourself, the overall karmic vector. All these events, taken together, point to one single lesson of the year of the Red Fire Horse for America. Freedom without maturity becomes destructive, and maturity without freedom becomes suffocating. This year teaches us to seek balance between resolve and responsibility at the level of the state and at the level of each individual life. Be honest with yourself. Receive events as wise lessons. Learn to read the messages of the universe. And always remember, it is not the event that matters. It is your attitude toward it. That is what forms your karma, your destiny, your inner world and peace, no matter what year you live in. In 2 weeks, we will talk about why it is so often difficult to stop wars, why peacemaking efforts so often break against an invisible barrier, and how this becomes a lesson for countries and for each individual person. Stay with me, my dear ones. Subscribe to the channel. If this video touched something important inside you, I will be grateful for your support with a like and a kind comment. It will help these meanings reach other people who may need them. I am here to create something meaningful and useful for people. See you soon, my dear ones. I embrace you with great warmth and love. I love you very much.